Imagine standing in the heart of Siberia, shivering in sub-zero temperatures as raging winds howl around you, drowning out your thoughts. Optimism here is a luxury. Temperatures plunge to minus 40 degrees Celsius and snow blankets the landscape endlessly. Now imagine spending the next 25 years in the Soviet Gulag, one of the most brutal prison systems in human history. Frostbite could strike at any moment, and time is measured not in days, but in hours. For most, it would mark the end of the road. But for one man, Slavomir Rawicz, it was only the beginning of an extraordinary fight for freedom. Despite the overwhelming odds, Rawicz managed to survive his imprisonment. Along with 6 others, he plotted a daring escape from a Siberian labor camp. But escaping was only the start. Ahead of them lay a 4,000-mile trek across some of the planet's most unforgiving terrain. Starving, they resorted to eating bark and insects. They crossed endless deserts and hauled themselves up mountains that seemed impossible to climb. This wasn't just a journey toward freedom. It was a battle against the impossible. What's astonishing is not just that they escaped, but how. How did they outsmart their captors, survive betrayal from within, and endure such brutal conditions? What kept them going when all seemed lost? This is more than a survival story. It's a tale of perseverance, sacrifice, and unbreakable will. Join me as we dive into the life of Slavomir Rawicz, a man who proved that the thirst for freedom and the will to live can conquer even the harshest fate. In 1939, as World War II exploded across Europe, Rawicz, a young Polish cavalry officer, was caught in the chaos. He became a target of the Soviet Union, one of the most repressive regimes in modern history. Stalin's secret police, the NKVD, arrested him on false espionage charges. Despite Rawicz's denials, a sham trial sealed his fate. He was sentenced to 25 years in the icy hell of Siberia, a place where guilt and innocence meant nothing. Even the journey to the Gulag was a nightmare. Cramped into overcrowded boxcars with dozens of others, Rawicz endured weeks of freezing temperatures, hunger, sickness, and despair. When the train finally stopped, he found himself at Kalma work camp, deep within the Siberian wilderness. The cold was so intense it burned your lungs. The frozen ground felt like solid steel beneath your feet. With the sun barely rising above the horizon, shadows stretched endlessly across a landscape buried in snow. The Gulag system was designed to break people. Prisoners toiled 12 to 16 hours a day, cutting timber, mining, and building roads across the ice. Food was almost non-existent. A slice of black bread so hard it could shatter teeth, and a thin soup that barely warmed your stomach. Starvation was constant. Disease, typhus, scurvy, claimed more lives than bullets. Nights were spent huddled in wooden barracks, breath visible in the freezing air, thin blankets offering no real warmth. Death was everywhere. The relentless work and brutal winters took their toll. Many simply gave up, their spirits crushed under the weight of endless suffering. Escape seemed impossible. The camp was surrounded by hundreds of miles of snow-covered forests, frozen rivers, and deadly mountains. Even if someone slipped past the guards and dogs, the wilderness alone could finish them. But Rawicz was different. He saw a sliver of hope where others saw none. Observing the guards, noting their routines, and quietly searching for allies, he began to plan. The odds were terrible, but Rawicz knew one thing. To stay was to die. And if there was even the smallest chance to live, he had to take it. When Rawicz and his companions began whispering about escape, most believed it was suicide. The idea was mad, reckless. But for Rawicz, hope burned brighter than fear. Against all odds, he made the decision that would change his life forever. He would break free from the impossible and set out on a journey that would stretch the very limits of human endurance. It was 1941. On a bitter Siberian night, the labor camp was shrouded in silence. The guards, weary from the brutal cold and endless routine, let their guard down. For Rawicz and 6 other prisoners, the moment had come. Moving like shadows into the forest, they slipped past barbed wire with nothing but determination in their hearts. Their plan was simple: head south, survive, and never look back. But they had no maps, no real supplies, and no clue what lay ahead. What followed was every bit as harrowing as the camp they fled. Their first test came immediately: the vast frozen wilderness of Siberia. Snow stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by the occasional bare tree. The cold was so intense that even sweat turned to frost on their skin. Every step through knee-deep snow drained their strength, and frostbite stalked them mercilessly. Nights offered no escape. Beneath a sky black as ink, they huddled for warmth, trembling as death hovered nearby. But they pressed on, fueled by that distant flicker of freedom. As the days blurred into weeks, hunger haunted every waking moment. With no supplies, they were forced to live off the land. They scavenged insects, moss, and bark, anything that might sustain them. Water came from scraping ice off frozen rivers, each drop a reminder of how fragile life had become. They avoided all settlements, knowing discovery meant either execution or a one-way ticket back to the gulag. The wilderness offered no comfort, just a brutal reminder of how small and powerless they were in a world ruled by nature. Weeks later, they crossed into Mongolia, but their nightmare was far from over. The next trial was the Gobi Desert, a land where blistering days scorched their skin and frigid nights cut through to the bone. Sand filled their shoes, rubbed their feet raw, and slowed every step. Food was scarcer than ever, water nearly non-existent. They dug for insects, hunted rodents, and drank from murky puddles when they could find them. The toll was obvious. Bodies grew weaker, movements slower. Some gave up. For them, the Gobi became their final resting place. But the survivors pressed on. Ahead loomed their greatest challenge yet: the Himalayas. The towering peaks of the world's highest mountain range were more than just obstacles. They were monuments to nature's power. Climbing them required everything they had left. Snowstorms erased their paths. Avalanches could bury them at any moment. The cold numbed their bodies and the thin air burned their lungs. Tensions rose. Hunger and exhaustion frayed nerves, and trust began to crumble. Fights broke out. Betrayals surfaced. One by one, members of the group fell, claimed by the elements, by illness, or by despair. Each loss tore at Rawicz, but he didn't stop. He pushed forward, driven by something stronger than pain: purpose. Frostbitten, starving, and grieving, he marched toward an uncertain hope. This was more than just a physical journey. It was a war of willpower. Every step south was a refusal to accept the fate others had written for him. Every mile was proof that the human spirit could endure even the most unimaginable suffering. And then, after months of torment, hunger, and heartbreak, they saw it. A distant glimmer on the horizon, the edge of an Asian nation, a land they had dreamed of for so long. They were close, but freedom still wasn't guaranteed. The final stretch of their journey would test them just as brutally as everything before. Who would make it to the end? And when would they finally be able to say they were truly free? Imagine, for a moment, having escaped a brutal prison camp, only to find yourself fighting nature's wrath at every turn. Malnutrition, frostbite, and exhaustion, all threatening your survival. Now, picture yourself embarking on a 4,000-mile journey across some of the most hostile landscapes on Earth. Every step feels like a battle against death itself. What would you do? Can you persevere in such conditions? Share your thoughts with us. Would you be able to keep going? Weeks of relentless ascent finally brought them to a land of green. They had crossed the vast, desolate snowfields, and now in British India, their liberation was within reach. The dream of freedom was no longer a distant fantasy. It had become a tangible reality. Rawicz and his companions wept, not just for the comrades they had lost along the way, but for their survival. Their absence was a silent tribute to the cost of their newfound freedom. His 4,000-mile trek across the Himalayas, the Gobi Desert, and the frozen wilderness of Siberia was more than a physical feat. It was an embodiment of endurance. It's about hope, perseverance, the will to keep moving forward, even when every circumstance conspires against you. But Rawicz's story raises deeper questions. How would we endure in the face of such adversity? If freedom were something we could purchase, how much would we be willing to sacrifice? What does it say about the human spirit that some can survive such horrific conditions and emerge not only alive, but driven to share their story with the world? Rawicz's tale is more than just a survival story. It's a testament to the strength of the human will and the lengths to which people will go in search of freedom. It's a story that inspires, yet challenges us to consider what we might do in similar circumstances. How would you handle what Rawicz endured? If you've made it this far, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Could you accomplish what he did? How has his story affected you? Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you're moved by this incredible tale of courage and survival, don't forget to subscribe for more stories of bravery, perseverance, and the unbreakable human spirit. This isn't just the story of one man. It's about the courage to fight for freedom, no matter the cost. Join our community of people who are passionate about these inspiring true stories. Together, we can preserve them and keep the legacy of resilience alive.